It's a strange thing to notice about yourself. How you can be surrounded by people, achievements, and noise, and still feel that something essential is missing. This story begins in one of those quiet, private moments most people don't talk about. You might recognize it. It's that moment when you're sitting alone after a long day, the phone screen finally dark, the room finally still, and a question rises that you can't easily push away. If I got everything I think I'm chasing, would it really make me a better person? The world answers that question for us all the time. It tells us, yes, get more, become more, be seen more, then you'll be better, then you'll matter. But deep down, there's a part of you that isn't fully convinced. This story is about that quiet doubt, about the uneasy space between external success and inner truth, and about the realization that what truly deepens a life isn't the size of your spotlight, but the softness of your heart. It's inspired by observing people like Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr., not through headlines or gossip, but through the simple, consistent way they seem to carry their humanity through fame. Not perfect, not saintly, just kind, in ways that feel grounded and real. Their journeys echo something many of us feel but struggle to put into words. That fame, praise, or success do not automatically make a person greater. Kindness does. How we move through the world does. How we treat the people who can do nothing for us does. But that realization rarely comes all at once. It usually arrives slowly, through small, almost forgettable moments. There was a time in my own life when I thought success would settle everything. It wasn't about red carpets or cameras, of course. My dreams were more ordinary. A better job. A car I didn't have to worry about breaking down. Enough money so that small things, like an unexpected bill or a broken appliance, didn't feel like minor emergencies. Maybe you've had your own version of that list. I believed that if I could just cross off a few of those items, the restless feeling inside would quiet down. I would become more confident, more secure, more complete. And to be fair, some of that came true. Over the years, I did get better at what I do. My work improved. I earned more. People started to respect my abilities. I became, in a small way, known in my little circle. From the outside, things looked fine. But that question kept returning on quiet evenings. If I'm doing so well, why do I still feel like something is missing? The answer didn't arrive as a big revelation. It came softly, almost invisibly, through ordinary interactions. The first moment I really noticed it was at work. I was in the middle of a busy day, trying to get through a pile of tasks, when a new colleague came by my desk. He was young, nervous, and clearly trying to find his footing. He asked for help with something simple, something I could have explained in 2 minutes. In that split second, I felt a small, selfish irritation rise up. I don't have time for this. I've worked hard to get here. I need to focus on my own things. There was a sense, barely conscious, that my time and attention were somehow more valuable now because I was more successful than he was. It was a quiet kind of arrogance, the type that hides behind business and importance. I almost brushed him off, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the way he kept his eyes slightly lowered, or the stiffness in his shoulders. I recognized that posture. I had worn it myself years before, in places where I felt small and unsure. So instead of telling him I was busy, I turned my chair and said, "Sure, let's go through it." The whole thing took 3 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. No life was changed in a visible way. He said thank you, I smiled, and that was that. But later, as I sat on the train home, that brief moment replayed in my mind, and a gentle, unsettling question surfaced. If I had been a little more important today, a little more rushed, a little more full of myself, I would have been unkind to him and probably wouldn't even remember it. How many times have I done that already? It was a small realization, but it stayed with me. We often talk about kindness like it's a grand gesture, a big donation, a public act of goodness. But in that moment, kindness revealed itself as something much quieter, a decision to see someone, to make a little space for them, even when you don't have to. Fame, success, status, they don't stop you from doing that. They just make it easier to forget. Over time, I started to notice a pattern in myself and in others. When people begin to rise, in their careers, in their social circles, in their achievements, the world starts treating them differently. Suddenly, their jokes seem funnier. Their opinions carry more weight. Their schedules become more guarded, their time more valuable. And slowly, if you're not careful, you begin to believe this new script about who you are. You start to think, my importance is in what I've done. My value is in what I can produce. My worth is in how others see me. It's not an evil mindset. It just grows quietly, like dust on a shelf. But here's the subtle danger. Once you start believing that your value comes from your achievements or your image, kindness begins to look optional. Like a pleasant extra, something you can give when it's convenient, when it doesn't get in the way of your goals. Yet some people, even in the brighter spotlights, don't seem to lose touch with something softer, more grounded. That's why the world is fascinated when it notices the rare stories of a famous person being quietly considerate, or patient, or unexpectedly humble. When people speak about Keanu Reeves helping crew members, or Robert Downey Jr. showing generosity to people he's worked with, what moves us isn't the scale of the act. It's the contrast. They are people who could easily forget to be kind, and yet they don't. Their greatness, as many people sense, doesn't come from their fame. It shows up in how they use their position, how they carry their humanity despite it. You don't need to know every detail of their lives to feel the lesson in that. Because if someone living under constant attention can still remember to treat the person in front of them with dignity, then what excuse do the rest of us really have? I began paying attention to the small ways I was using my own little status, however modest, to create distance instead of connection. I noticed how easy it was to cut off a conversation by acting too busy. How simple it was to ignore the quiet coworker in the corner. How natural it felt to give more warmth to people who could help me, while offering only politeness to those who couldn't. None of it was extreme. That's what made it unsettling. These were ordinary choices, the kind that pile up day after day and shape the person you become. One evening, I visited an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We sat in a small kitchen, drinking tea that had gone lukewarm, talking about how our lives had changed. He told me quietly about a difficult time he'd gone through, a period when he felt invisible, professionally lost, and personally exhausted. During that time, he said, a few people stood out to him, not because they solved his problems, but because they treated him with unforced kindness when he could offer nothing in return. A lot of people disappeared, he said. Or they stayed, but you could feel they didn't really see me anymore. They just saw failure or inconvenience. But there were a few who talked to me like I was still me. Not a project. Not a disappointment. He paused, looking down at his hands. I don't remember every person who praised me when I was doing well, he said. But I remember every person who sat with me when I wasn't. His words sank into the room. No background music, no swelling emotion. Just the quiet truth of lived experience. I went home that night and thought about how I had measured greatness in my own life. For a long time, I had linked it to what I was building, what I was achieving, how far I had come from where I started. But in my friend's story, greatness had nothing to do with that. The people he remembered most weren't the most successful or the most impressive. They were the kindest. As I reflected more, another thought emerged. Kindness isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a practice, a choice, an orientation to life. It requires something that success alone can't give you: the willingness to see beyond yourself. We often imagine kindness as soft and easy. In reality, it can be quietly demanding. It asks you to interrupt your rush to listen to someone who speaks slowly. It asks you to soften a harsh reply when you've had a long day. It asks you to forgive a small slight instead of carrying it like proof that the world is against you. In a way, kindness is a kind of bravery. Not the kind that gets applause, but the kind that dares to stay gentle in a world that often rewards hardness. And this is where fame, status, and achievement become an interesting test. Because as your world expands, as more people know your name or want something from you, it becomes easier to use business as a shield. The more reason you have to feel important, the more temptation there is to put your comfort and image above your humanity. That's why the stories that quietly circulate about people like Keanu Reeves or Robert Downey Jr. have such a resonance. Not because they are perfect, no one is. Not because they are flawless examples, everyone has contradictions. But because, in a culture that treats fame like a license to be self-absorbed, they sometimes choose a different path: simple respect, small gestures, shared humanity. To many people, that looks like greatness. Not the greatness of being talked about, but the greatness of being remembered with warmth by the people who actually crossed your path. One day, a small moment brought this home to me in an unexpected way. I was heading into a building on a rainy day, juggling a bag, my phone, and an umbrella that refused to close properly. A security guard, someone I'd seen many times but never really acknowledged beyond a quick nod, stepped forward and held the door for me. It was such a small thing. He smiled, made a light comment about the weather, and waited until I was fully inside before letting the door close. I thanked him, a little distracted, and went on with my day. Hours later, when the business had faded, that tiny interaction floated back into my mind. I realized that this person, who probably saw hundreds of faces a day and got ignored by most of them, had taken a moment to make my day a little easier. No cameras, no audience, nothing to gain. He simply saw someone struggling with a stubborn umbrella and chose to be kind. I started paying more attention to him after that. I learned his name. I greeted him when I entered. We shared small bits of conversation, minute details about how his day was going, how long his shift was, whether he'd had lunch yet. Over weeks and months, he went from the security guard downstairs to an actual person in my mind. Not a background figure in the movie of my life, but a human being with worries, stories, and a quiet decency. I remember thinking, if I ever become someone others consider important, will I still remember to treat people like him this way? Or will I start walking by with only a polite smile, guarded by my own self-importance? The honest answer was uncomfortable, because I could already see the tendency in myself to prioritize certain people over others, to shape my warmth around usefulness. Realizing this wasn't pleasant, but it was clarifying. It made me understand that greatness isn't something that suddenly appears when enough people approve of you. It's shaped every day, in small, mostly invisible decisions, like whether you stop to listen, whether you remember a name, whether you offer your full attention to someone others overlook. Over time, I began to see a simple pattern in the stories that moved me. When people spoke with admiration about someone they respected, whether a public figure, a colleague, a relative, or a quiet neighbor, what touched them was almost always kindness. Not how impressive they were, not how famous, but how they made others feel. We look at someone whose life is large and visible and wonder what's behind their calmness, their groundedness. We project meaning onto their actions, their quotes, their public gestures. But the lesson we can draw is less about the specifics of their lives and more about the direction of their hearts. When someone uses their platform, however big or small, to remain gentle, patient, and human, that tells us something important. Fame can amplify you, but it cannot complete you. Success can decorate your life, but it cannot deepen it. That deepening comes from something else. From the unseen choices you make in quiet rooms and ordinary hours. From how you treat the assistant, the cleaner, the cashier, the person online who disagrees with you, the friend who has nothing impressive to offer but their presence. From how you respond on the days when you're tired, or hurt, or disappointed, and kindness feels like an effort instead of a reflex. If you look back on your own life, you might notice this too. Think of the people who shaped you, not just the famous names on screens, but the real faces from your own story. A teacher who spoke to you with respect when you were young and unsure. A family member who stayed soft in the middle of conflict. A friend who didn't leave when things got messy. A stranger who helped you on a day you were quietly breaking. They may never be known outside the small universe of your memories. But in your heart, they carry a kind of greatness that no headline could match. Because kindness, sustained over time, becomes a kind of light. Not a dramatic spotlight that blinds everyone, but a steady glow that helps people see themselves more clearly. That's the kind of greatness that doesn't fade when trends change or attention shifts. It lives on in the way people remember you, in the way they speak your name when you're not in the room. Sitting alone now, on another quiet evening, the question feels different than it did years ago. Will success make me a better person? The answer, I've learned, is no. Success might make me more comfortable. It might expand my options. It might even allow me to help people in bigger ways. But it cannot, by itself, make me kinder. It cannot, by itself, give me depth. It cannot, by itself, teach me how to truly see another human being. Only intention can do that. Only practice. Only the daily, imperfect effort to remember that everyone around me is living a life as complex and fragile as mine. Fame didn't make people like Keanu Reeves or Robert Downey Jr. greater. At best, it gave the world a chance to notice the kindness they chose to carry with them. In the same way, whatever fame or recognition you experience in your own life, whether it's 3 people or 3 million, will only amplify what is already there. If there is insecurity, it will echo louder. If there is ego, it will grow taller. If there is kindness, it will reach further. So the real work is not in being seen by more people. It's in becoming someone worth being seen. Someone whose presence leaves others feeling a little more human, a little less alone, a little more valued. That kind of greatness is available to you right now, long before anything glamorous happens, and even if it never does. It lives in the decision you make the next time someone asks for your help when you're busy. In the way you speak to the person serving your food. In the patience you show to someone who is still learning what you already know. It lives in your willingness to stay soft in a world that keeps telling you to harden. In the end,